She wiped orange juice from her face with trembling fingers, the liquid dripping onto the cafe floor as a dozen phones captured her humiliation. "Have a good day, sir," she whispered. The white billionaire smirked, satisfied he'd put the black waitress in her place. But in exactly 24 hours, he'd walk into the most important meeting of his life and discover a truth that stops him cold and leaves him dumbfounded. Welcome, my beautiful family. If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video and comment where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories. And trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's proceed. Rain pelted the windshield of Connor Blake's cherry red Portofino, each droplet catching the gray morning light like tiny bullets. 47%, he growled into his Bluetooth earpiece. Those bastards tanked my stock by 47%. Trevor Kane's voice crackled through the speakers, thin with nervousness. "Sir, the board meeting went better than expected," Mr. Goldman said. Goldman said nothing that matters. Connor jerked the car into a parking space outside Brew and Bike Cafe on Pine Street, his knuckles white against the leather steering wheel. "They questioned my leadership, Trevor. My leadership. I built Blake Tech from nothing. Nothing." At 32, Connor Blake commanded a tech empire worth $12 billion. His company had revolutionized cloud computing, made him the youngest billionaire in Seattle's history, and landed him on every major magazine cover. Yet this morning, his perfectly styled blonde hair caught raindrops like accusations, and his piercing blue eyes burned with a kind of rage that came from feeling cornered. He stepped out of the Ferrari, his charcoal wool coat flapping in the December wind. The cafe windows glowed warm against the storm, packed with Sunday morning customers seeking refuge from Seattle's relentless rain. "Get Rachel on damage control," Connor snapped into his phone. "I want those news stories buried by noon." "Sir, about the Goldman Sachs meeting tomorrow." Connor ended the call and shoved through the cafe's glass door, bell chiming his arrival like a warning. Destiny Washington balanced 3 plates on her left arm while pouring coffee with her right, moving through the crowded cafe with practiced grace. Her natural hair was pulled back in a simple style, and her brown uniform dress couldn't hide the quiet confidence in her posture. "Order up, table 6, called Beverly Patterson from behind the counter, her silver hair catching the cafe's warm lights. "Got it, Bev." Destiny's voice carried a subtle authority that most customers missed. At 28, she possessed the kind of presence that made people look twice without understanding why. She delivered the breakfast plates to a family near the window, their young daughter giggling at the whipped cream on her pancakes. "Anything else I can get you folks?" "Just the check when you have a chance," the father smiled. "Great service, thank you." Destiny nodded, already calculating her next move. For 6 weeks, she'd worked the Sunday morning shift at this particular cafe, learning patterns, observing behaviors, gathering intelligence. Most people saw a waitress. They had no idea they were looking at the youngest senior partner in Goldman Sachs history, a woman who'd closed deals worth hundreds of billions. Her phone buzzed against her hip. A text from Lawrence Goldman himself. Final numbers confirmed. $87 billion acquisition ready. Need character assessment complete. She deleted the message and picked up the coffee pot. Through the window, she watched a red Ferrari park across the street. Her target was arriving right on schedule. Connor Blake pushed through the door, rain dripping from his coat, phone pressed to his ear. His voice carried across the cafe like a blade. "I don't care what the headlines say. I am Blake Tech. Without me, that company is worthless code and empty promises." Several customers glanced up from their meals, recognizing the famous face from business magazines. Connor's jaw clenched as he noticed their stares, his blue eyes scanning the room until they found an empty booth in the corner. Destiny watched him stride across the cafe, noting the tension in his shoulders, the way his free hand clenched and unclenched. 6 weeks of observation had taught her his patterns. Bad meetings made him cruel. Financial pressure made him dangerous. Today, both had converged. She grabbed a menu and approached his table, her expression neutral but alert. Everything about this moment had been planned, calculated, prepared for. The merger documents sat in her briefcase 3 miles away, waiting for tomorrow's meeting. But first, She needed to confirm what kind of man Connor Blake really was when he thought nobody important was watching. "Good morning," she said, setting the menu down gently. "Can I start you with some coffee?" Connor looked up from his phone, his gaze sliding over her dismissively. She wasn't a person to him. She was furniture with a voice. Black coffee. Strong. He returned to his call without another glance. Destiny nodded and walked away, her trained eye cataloging every detail. The way he'd looked through her rather than at her. The casual dismissal in his tone. The assumption that she existed solely for his convenience. Just like the others warned me, she thought, pouring coffee from the fresh pot Beverly had prepared. He sees uniforms, not people. She carried the cup back to his table, where Connor was ending another heated phone conversation. "Here's your coffee, sir." She set it down carefully, noting how he still hadn't made eye contact. "Fine." Connor waved her away like shooing a fly, then immediately called out, "Actually, wait." Destiny turned back, her expression patient. "Bring me the breakfast special. Eggs over easy, wheat toast, no butter." Connor's voice carried the tone of someone accustomed to instant obedience. "And make sure the eggs aren't runny. Last time they were disgusting." "Of course, sir. I'll make sure the kitchen knows." As she walked toward the counter, Destiny's mind raced through the intelligence she'd gathered. 6 weeks of watching Connor Blake had revealed a pattern. He treated service staff like they were invisible until he needed something, then like they were incompetent until they proved otherwise. Every interaction confirmed what the Goldman Sachs behavioral assessment had predicted. Narcissistic personality with sociopathic tendencies, she recalled from the psychological profile. Views human relationships as transactional. Requires constant validation. But tomorrow's merger would require more than psychological profiles. It demanded character assassination so complete that Connor Blake would have no choice but to accept Goldman Sachs terms. Or watch his empire crumble. She placed his order with Danny Rivers, the 20-year-old busboy who doubled as a short-order cook on busy mornings. "Table 12 wants eggs over easy, wheat toast, no butter," she told him. "And Danny, make sure everything's perfect." That's Connor Blake. Danny's eyes widened. The tech guy. The one from all the magazines. The very one. He's having a bad morning already. And it's about to get much worse, Destiny thought, watching Connor through the service window as he barked orders into his phone. The viral video would surface by evening. The board would see their CEO's true character in high definition. And tomorrow morning, she'd walk into that boardroom with enough ammunition to reshape the entire deal. Connor Blake thought he was grabbing coffee after a difficult board meeting. He had no idea he was about to hand Goldman Sachs the perfect weapon to destroy him. Connor's third phone call in 20 minutes had left his voice hoarse with fury. The breakfast plate sat untouched before him, eggs congealing as he paced the narrow space beside his booth. "Rachel, I don't want excuses. I want solutions." His free hand gestured wildly, nearly knocking over his coffee cup. "Stock down 47% because those investors think they can question my vision." Destiny approached with fresh coffee, moving carefully through the crowded cafe. Sunday morning customers filled every table, families enjoying pancakes, couples sharing newspapers, college students hunched over laptops. The warm buzz of conversation created a cocoon of normalcy that Connor's escalating anger was beginning to shatter. "More coffee, sir?" she asked quietly, noting how his face had flushed red during the call. Connor held up one finger without looking at her, continuing his tirade into the phone. "Goldman Sachs thinks they're doing me a favor with this merger? I built Blake Tech with my bare hands while those suits were playing golf." Several nearby customers glanced over, their conversations faltering. A mother pulled her young daughter closer, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Destiny waited patiently, coffee pot in hand, watching Connor's body language deteriorate. His shoulders hunched forward like a predator preparing to strike. His jaw muscles twitched with barely contained rage. 6 weeks of observation had taught her to recognize this particular storm pattern. "Sir," she tried again, keeping her voice gentle, "would you like me to warm up your coffee?" This time Connor looked at her, really looked, and something ugly flickered behind his blue eyes. He saw her dark skin, her uniform, her patient expression, and his mind made the calculation it always made. Here was someone safe to hurt. "No," he snapped, ending his call with a vicious jab at the phone screen. "What I would like is for people to do their jobs properly the first time." "Of course, sir. Is there anything wrong with your breakfast?" Connor stared down at the plate of cold eggs and untouched toast. The food wasn't the problem. The board meeting wasn't the problem. The stock price wasn't the problem. The problem was that Connor Blake, master of the universe, felt small for the first time in years, and he needed someone to pay for that feeling. His gaze swept the cafe, taking inventory. Families with children. Professional couples. College kids with expensive laptops. All potential witnesses. All potential problems. But the waitress? She was nobody. Less than nobody. "Actually, yes," Connor said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "There's a huge problem with my breakfast." Destiny's internal warning system activated. She'd seen this look before, during her years climbing the corporate ladder, in boardrooms where men decided she didn't belong. But she maintained her professional composure. "I'm sorry to hear that. What can I fix for you?" Connor picked up his glass of fresh orange juice, the one Danny had brought 5 minutes earlier. The pulp swirled in the golden liquid as he tilted it toward the light. "You people," he began, his voice carrying across the increasingly quiet cafe, "you just don't understand quality, do you?" The words hit Destiny like physical blows. "You people." In 2 words, Connor had revealed everything she needed to know, everything the Goldman Sachs board needed to hear. But the rational part of her brain, the part that had negotiated billion-dollar deals, urged caution. "I apologize if the service hasn't met your expectations," she said carefully. "Let me get Beverly, our manager." "No." Connor stood up, his 6-foot frame towering over her. "You're going to learn right now what happens when you don't know your place." The cafe had gone completely silent. Conversations died mid-sentence. Coffee cups paused halfway to lips. Even the espresso machine seemed to hold its breath. "He's going to do it," Destiny realized with crystal clarity. "He's actually going to do it." She could have stopped it. One word about her real identity, one mention of Goldman Sachs, and Connor would have backed down instantly. But stopping it would ruin everything. 6 weeks of careful intelligence gathering, months of merger preparation, the perfect opportunity to expose his true character to the world. Instead, she stood perfectly still and let it happen. Connor raised the glass of orange juice high above her head, his blue eyes blazing with righteous fury. "This is what you get for not knowing your place." The orange juice cascaded down in slow motion, soaking through her hair, running down her face in sticky rivulets, staining the front of her brown uniform. The cold liquid shocked her system, but she didn't flinch, didn't cry out, didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. The cafe erupted. "Oh my God!" A woman's voice, sharp with outrage. Did he just... A man's voice, disbelieving. "Someone call the police." Another voice, angry and clear. Phone cameras appeared like magic, a dozen different angles capturing Connor's satisfied smirk as orange juice dripped from Destiny's chin onto the cafe floor. The clicking of camera shutters mixed with gasps of horror and muttered curses. Beverly Patterson emerged from behind the counter, her face white with shock. "Sir, you need to leave. Now." But Connor wasn't finished. He leaned down until his face was inches from Destiny's, his voice a venomous whisper meant to carry. "That's what happens when you forget that some of us matter and some of us don't. Maybe next time you'll remember to serve your betters with a little more respect." Destiny wiped orange juice from her eyes with the back of her hand, her movements deliberate and controlled. When she spoke, her voice was steady, professional, devastating in its quiet dignity. "Have a good day, sir." 4 words. No anger. No tears. No reaction at all beyond those 4 words delivered with the kind of grace that comes from knowing exactly who you are, regardless of who other people think you are. Connor straightened up, his expression shifting from satisfaction to confusion. This wasn't the reaction he'd expected. Where was the crying? The begging? The acknowledgement that he was right, that she was nothing? "That's it," he demanded. That's all you have to say? Destiny looked at him for a long moment, orange juice still dripping from her hair. Around them, the cafe held its breath, cameras recording, witnesses frozen in disbelief. Have a good day, sir, she repeated. Then she turned and walked toward the back of the cafe with measured steps, her head held high, leaving Connor standing alone in a circle of horrified silence. Jake Morrison, a regular customer who'd been reading the Sunday paper, stood up slowly. You're disgusting, he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Absolutely disgusting. She's just a waitress, Connor protested, but his voice lacked conviction. The faces staring at him weren't convinced. They were appalled. She's a human being, said the mother who'd pulled her daughter closer. And you're a monster. Connor looked around the cafe, seeing his reflection in dozens of phone screens, all of them recording, all of them broadcasting his humiliation of Destiny to the world. For the first time, doubt crept into his voice. You don't understand. I'm Connor Blake. I'm worth $12 billion. I built an empire. And you just destroyed it, Beverly Patterson said quietly, her hand on her own phone. Security footage, customer phones, and my personal guarantee that this video will be everywhere by tonight. Get out of my cafe. Connor threw a $100 bill on the table, as if money could somehow undo what had just happened. But the damage was done, recorded in high definition from multiple angles, ready to circle the globe at the speed of social media. He pushed through the crowd of disgusted customers, their voices following him to the door. Racist pig. Hope someone puts you in your place. Karma's coming for you. The Ferrari's engine roared to life, but Connor sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, staring at the cafe windows. Inside, he could see Destiny talking calmly with Beverly, other staff members bringing her towels, customers approaching to offer support. She looked composed, unbroken, like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. For the first time in his life, Connor Blake wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. But she's just a waitress, he told himself as he pulled into traffic. Just a waitress. 12 hours later, the video would have 20 million views. 24 hours later, Connor Blake would learn exactly who that waitress really was. In the cafe, Destiny accepted a clean towel from Danny and began methodically wiping orange juice from her face. Beverly hovered nearby, her expression a mixture of concern and barely contained rage. Honey, are you okay? Do you want to file a police report? Press charges. I'm fine, Destiny said quietly, catching her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Orange pulp clung to her hair, and her uniform was ruined, but her eyes remained steady, calculating, satisfied. Everything had gone exactly according to plan. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lawrence Goldman. Board meeting moved to 9 a.m. All major news outlets requesting comment. Are you ready? Destiny deleted the message and returned to the dining room, where customers were still processing what they'd witnessed. Several approached her with offers of support, business cards, connections to lawyers. Thank you, she told each one. Really? But I'll be fine. Better than fine, she thought, watching the Ferrari disappear into Seattle traffic. Connor Blake just handed me everything I need to destroy him. The merger documents in her briefcase would remain unchanged. The financial terms were already favorable to Goldman Sachs. But now she had something infinitely more valuable than leverage. She had justice. And tomorrow morning, when Connor Blake walked into that boardroom expecting to save his company, he would discover that the worthless waitress he'd humiliated held his entire future in her perfectly manicured hands. Connor Blake's penthouse apartment overlooked Elliott Bay from the 42nd floor, its glass walls offering a panoramic view of Seattle's gray winter skyline. He stood in his marble bathroom, splashing cold water on his face, trying to wash away the memory of what had happened at the cafe. She deserved it, he told himself for the dozenth time. Uppity waitress needed to learn her place. But the image wouldn't leave his head. Her calm brown eyes. The way she'd wiped juice from her face without breaking. Those 4 words. Have a good day, sir. No anger. No tears. Just dignity that made his victory feel hollow. His phone buzzed constantly on the granite countertop. Text after text. Call after call. Connor ignored them all, focusing instead on his reflection in the mirror. Blonde hair perfectly styled. Blue eyes clear and determined. The face that had graced Forbes magazine covers, Business Week features, TED Talk stages. He was Connor Blake. He was untouchable. The doorbell chimed, echoing through the vast apartment. Connor pulled on a fresh white shirt and walked to the entrance, expecting to find Trevor with damage control updates. Instead, Rachel Foster stood in the hallway, her usually composed face flushed with panic. His head of public relations clutched a tablet against her chest like a shield. "We need to talk. Now." Rachel pushed past him into the living room, her heels clicking against the polished concrete floors. At 45, she'd managed crises for tech executives, politicians, and celebrities. Connor had never seen her look this rattled. "Rachel, whatever it is can wait. I had a difficult morning, and I need—" "No." Rachel spun around, her voice sharp. "It can't wait. Sit down." Something in her tone made Connor obey. He settled onto his leather couch, noting how Rachel remained standing, pacing like a caged animal. "Tell me you didn't pour orange juice on a black waitress this morning." The words hit Connor like ice water. "How did you? Tell me you didn't do it." Connor's jaw tightened. "She was disrespectful. I put her in her place. End of story." Rachel closed her eyes, her face going pale. When she opened them, Connor saw something he'd never seen before. Fear. "Connor, you're trending on Twitter. #1. Worldwide." She held up the tablet, and Connor's stomach dropped. The screen showed a video thumbnail, him standing over Destiny, orange juice cascading down her face. The caption read, "Racist billionaire attacks black waitress. Watch this monster's meltdown." 17 million views. And climbing. "This is impossible," Connor whispered, grabbing the tablet. "Nobody knew who I was. It was just some cafe. Jake Morrison knew who you were. He's got 2 million TikTok followers. Beverly Patterson, the cafe owner?" She posted the security footage on Facebook. It's been shared 400,000 times in 3 hours. Connor scrolled through the comments, each one a dagger to his carefully constructed image. "Hope this racist pig loses everything. That waitress showed more class than this billionaire ever will. Someone dox this monster. He needs to face consequences. Blake Tech stock about to tank harder than his reputation." "Make it stop," Connor said quietly. "Take it down. All of it." Rachel laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "You can't take down the internet, Connor. This is viral. It's everywhere. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, they're all running the story." Connor's phone rang, the sound echoing through the apartment like an alarm. Trevor's name flashed on the screen. "Don't answer it," Rachel warned. "He's been calling me too. The board is in emergency session. Stock price is in free fall. We're looking at a complete public relations disaster." But Connor was already answering. "Trevor, thank God. Tell me you've got this under control." Trevor's voice cracked with panic. "Sir, I need you to get down here immediately. The board is considering removing you as CEO. They're saying the Goldman Sachs merger is at risk. Mr. Goldman himself called an hour ago." The tablet slipped from Connor's hands, clattering to the floor. "Goldman called? What did he say?" "He said the merger is contingent on Blake Tech maintaining certain standards of corporate conduct. Sir, they're threatening to pull out entirely." Connor's world tilted. The Goldman Sachs merger wasn't just a business deal. It was salvation. Blake Tech's cloud computing platform was hemorrhaging money, losing ground to younger, more agile competitors. Without Goldman's $87 billion acquisition, the company would collapse within 18 months. "This is insane," Connor said into the phone. "One incident. One moment of poor judgment. They can't destroy my entire life over one moment." "Sir," Trevor's voice was barely audible, "it's not just one incident anymore. People are digging. They found the harassment lawsuit from 2019 that we settled. The discrimination complaint from your former assistant. The video of you yelling at that parking attendant last year. Connor ended the call and hurled the phone against the wall, where it exploded into plastic fragments. Rachel didn't flinch. "You need to make a statement," she said. "Full apology. Express genuine remorse. Promise to enter sensitivity training. Donate to civil rights organizations. Complete image rehabilitation. Apologize." Connor's voice rose to a roar. Apologize for what? For expecting decent service? For refusing to be disrespected by some minimum wage nobody? That minimum wage nobody just destroyed your reputation in 4 hours. Connor began pacing, his mind racing. There has to be a way out of this. Money talks. Everyone has a price. Find out who she is. Buy her off. Make her recant. Rachel stared at him with something approaching disgust. Are you listening to yourself? You poured juice on an innocent woman because you were having a bad day. The entire world saw it. And your solution is to bribe her. My solution is to survive this. Blake Tech employs 14,000 people. If Goldman Sachs pulls out, those jobs disappear. The company dies. Everything I built gets destroyed because one waitress couldn't handle a little juice. The apartment fell silent except for the sound of rain against the windows. Rachel gathered her things, her movements deliberate and final. Where are you going? Connor demanded. To write your resignation letter. Because if you won't save yourself, maybe the board can save the company. After she left, Connor stood alone in his penthouse, Seattle spread out below him like a kingdom he was losing piece by piece. He retrieved his backup phone and scrolled through the video again, studying Destiny's face frame by frame. There was something wrong with the picture. Something he couldn't identify. The way she'd stood so still, letting it happen. The complete absence of surprise in her eyes. Like she'd been expecting it. Like she'd wanted it to happen. No, Connor thought. That's impossible. She's just a waitress. Just a nobody who got lucky with her 15 minutes of fame. But doubt gnawed at him like acid. Meanwhile, across town, Destiny sat in her actual office on the 35th floor of the Goldman Sachs building, still wearing her juice-stained uniform. The view from her window showed the same Seattle skyline Connor was contemplating, but from a different angle, a different perspective. Lawrence Goldman sat across from her desk, his expression a mixture of admiration and concern. At 62, he built Goldman Sachs into a global powerhouse through careful planning and ruthless execution. He understood exactly what Destiny had accomplished. 17 million views and climbing, he said, scrolling through his phone. CNN wants an interview. The Seattle Times is running a front-page story. Blake Tech stock is down 63%. And the merger? Destiny asked, toweling orange pulp from her hair. Delayed pending further review of Blake's fitness as CEO. The board is in chaos. 3 major investors have already pulled out. Lawrence paused, studying her face. You knew this would happen. You planned it. I gathered intelligence, Destiny corrected. Connor Blake revealed his character. I simply documented it. By letting him humiliate you in public. Destiny's phone buzzed with another interview request, which she declined. Sometimes you have to be willing to take a hit to land the perfect punch. Connor Blake just handed us complete control over this merger. Lawrence leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. He'll fight back. Men like Blake don't accept defeat easily. He'll try to discredit you, paint you as an opportunist or a gold digger. He might even try to buy you off. Let him try. Destiny's voice carried the quiet confidence of someone who'd already won. Tomorrow morning, I walk into that boardroom as the senior partner handling the biggest merger in Goldman Sachs history. Connor Blake walks in as a disgraced CEO whose company is hemorrhaging value by the hour. And then, Destiny smiled, the first genuine smile she'd allowed herself all day. Then I give him a choice. Accept our terms, including his immediate resignation and a complete restructuring of Blake Tech's leadership, or watch his company die. You're assuming he'll choose to save the company over his pride. I'm counting on it. Men like Connor Blake always choose money over principles. It's what makes them predictable. Lawrence stood to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, I'm sorry you had to endure that. No one should be treated the way he treated you. Destiny touched her hair, still damp with orange juice. It was necessary. Connor Blake needed to show his true face to the world. And tomorrow, when he realizes exactly who he attacked, the look in his eyes will make every sticky drop worth it. As Lawrence left, Destiny turned back to her computer screen, where the merger documents awaited her final review. $87 billion. Connor Blake's entire empire, restructured according to Goldman Sachs' vision. Have a good day, sir, she thought, remembering her parting words at the cafe. Tomorrow, she'd show Connor Blake exactly what kind of day she had planned for him. The Goldman Sachs conference room on the 42nd floor buzzed with tension as Seattle's most powerful business leaders gathered for an emergency session. The mahogany table reflected the city lights beyond the windows, where protesters had begun assembling outside the building with signs reading, "Justice for Waitress," and "Blake must go." Connor Blake sat at one end of the polished table, his usually perfect appearance showing cracks. His tie hung slightly loose, his blonde hair mussed from running his hands through it repeatedly. Across from him, Patricia Quinn and 3 other Blake Tech board members maintained careful distance, as if his disgrace might be contagious. "The situation is untenable," Patricia said, her voice cutting through the room's heavy silence. At 58, she'd served on corporate boards for 2 decades, but she'd never seen a crisis unfold this quickly. Stock price down 71%. Major clients threatening to pull contracts. The Goldman Sachs merger hanging by a thread. Trevor Kane stood behind Connor's chair, his tablet displaying real-time social media metrics like a doomsday clock. "Sir, we're approaching 25 million video views. #BlakeRacist is trending in 43 countries." Connor's jaw clenched. One incident, one moment of poor judgment, and you're all ready to throw away everything I've built. Poor judgment. Patricia's voice rose. "Connor, you poured juice on a black woman while calling her worthless. In front of witnesses. While being recorded. She was disrespectful. She asked if you wanted dessert." The room erupted in heated arguments, voices overlapping in a cacophony of blame and recrimination. Connor found himself defending actions he wasn't sure he understood, while board members questioned decisions they'd supported for years. At precisely 7 p.m., the conference room doors opened with mechanical precision. Lawrence Goldman entered first, his silver hair catching the overhead lights, followed by Sandra Lee, Goldman's chief legal counsel. Behind them walked a woman Connor didn't recognize, carrying a leather briefcase and moving with quiet authority. She wore a charcoal business suit that transformed her completely from the waitress he remembered. Her natural hair was styled professionally, and her brown eyes surveyed the room with calculating intelligence. When those eyes met Connor's across the table, something cold passed between them. "Gentlemen, ladies," Lawrence said, taking his seat at the head of the table. "Thank you for accommodating this emergency meeting. Given recent events, Goldman Sachs has requested an immediate review of the proposed merger terms." Connor leaned forward, desperation creeping into his voice. "Mr. Goldman, I understand there are concerns about today's incident, but I assure you, it was completely out of character. A momentary lapse in judgment that in no way reflects Blake Tech's corporate values." "Corporate values," Lawrence repeated slowly, as if tasting the words. "Yes, let's discuss those. I'd like you to meet Destiny Washington, our senior partner who's been handling the due diligence for this acquisition." The woman in the charcoal suit nodded politely around the table. "Good evening, everyone." Connor stared at her, his brain struggling to process conflicting information. The face was familiar, but everything else was wrong. The confidence, the expensive clothes, the way other people deferred to her presence. "Ms. Washington has spent considerable time researching Blake Tech's corporate culture," Lawrence continued. 6 weeks of intensive investigation, in fact. "Haven't you, Destiny?" "Yes, sir. Very intensive." Connor's world tilted slightly. Something about her voice, the cadence of her words. Where had he heard that voice before? Patricia Quinn glanced between the Goldman Sachs representatives, sensing undercurrents she couldn't identify. "Mr. Goldman, we're prepared to address any concerns about today's incident." Connor has agreed to issue a public apology and undergo sensitivity training. Has he? Lawrence's eyebrows rose. Connor, is that accurate? Connor nodded quickly, his eyes still fixed on Destiny. Absolutely. Whatever it takes to move forward with this merger. Destiny opened her briefcase and withdrew a thick folder. Before we discuss apologies, perhaps we should review some of my research findings. She began laying photographs across the table. Security camera stills, social media screenshots, witness statements. Each image told a story of Connor Blake's interactions with service staff, minorities, women. The pattern was undeniable. March 2023, Destiny said, her voice clinical and precise. Verbal altercation with a black parking attendant at Pike Place Market. Multiple witnesses. Connor's face paled. That was completely taken out of context. July 2023. Restaurant incident where you berated a Hispanic busboy for not clearing your table fast enough. The manager had to intervene. He was incompetent. October 2023. Hotel confrontation with a female desk clerk who refused to give you a room upgrade. You called her, quote, a stupid woman who doesn't know her place, unquote. Patricia Quinn stared at Connor in horror. Is this true? November 2023. Destiny continued relentlessly. Country club incident where you complained that the black caddy was uppity and demanded a replacement. Each revelation hit the room like a physical blow. Board members exchanged glances, their faces reflecting growing disgust. Connor realized with dawning terror that his entire pattern of behavior was being dissected under fluorescent lights. Where did you get all this? He whispered. Destiny looked directly at him for the first time since entering the room. Thorough research, Mr. Blake. Due diligence requires understanding the character of the people we're considering as partners. This is a witch hunt, Connor said, but his voice lacked conviction. You're taking isolated incidents and building a narrative that doesn't exist. Am I? Destiny reached into her briefcase again, this time producing a tablet. Perhaps you'd like to see today's incident from a different angle. She pressed play, and the room filled with the sound of Connor's voice, crystal clear and unmistakably venomous. You people just don't understand quality, do you? The camera angle was perfect, catching every word, every expression, every drop of orange juice. But this wasn't the shaky phone footage that had gone viral. This was professional quality, multiple angles, perfect audio. Connor's blood turned to ice. How do you have this footage? Beverly Patterson is my cousin, Destiny said simply. She installed new security cameras last month. High definition, multiple angles, professional audio recording. When I told her I was investigating Blake Teka's corporate culture, she agreed to help. The room spun around Connor as the implications hit him. You planned this. You set me up. I documented your character, Mr. Blake. You chose your own actions. Lawrence Goldman leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. Ms. Washington has recommended that Goldman Sachs withdraw from the merger entirely. Blake Teka's corporate culture appears to be fundamentally incompatible with our values. No! Connor lurched forward, desperation overriding dignity. You can't do this. The company will die without this merger. 14,000 jobs will disappear. Then perhaps, Destiny said quietly, you should have thought about that before you decided to humiliate a black woman because you were having a bad day. Patricia Quinn found her voice. Mr. Goldman, the board is prepared to remove Connor as CEO immediately. We can restructure the entire executive team if necessary. That's a start, Lawrence said. But the damage to Blake Teka's reputation may be irreversible. The viral video has been seen by 50 million people worldwide. Every major news outlet is covering the story. This isn't just a PR problem anymore. It's a brand toxicity issue. Connor looked around the table at faces that had once shown him respect, admiration, even fear. Now he saw only disgust, disappointment, and calculation. These people were already writing his corporate obituary. There has to be a way to fix this, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Some kind of rehabilitation program. Community service. A charitable foundation. Anything. Destiny watched him beg, noting the way his arrogance had crumbled into pathetic desperation. This was the moment she'd planned for, the intersection where his pride would collide with his survival instincts. There might be one option, she said carefully. The room held its breath. Connor's blue eyes locked onto hers like a drowning man grabbing for a rope. What option? Complete restructuring. You resign as CEO immediately and permanently. Blake Tech's board is reconstituted with Goldman Sachs oversight. All hiring and promotion practices are reviewed by independent auditors. And you personally fund a $50 million diversity and inclusion program. Connor's face went white. $50 million? And resign permanently. That's corporate suicide. No, Mr. Blake, Destiny corrected. Corporate suicide is what you did this morning when you decided that your hurt feelings mattered more than basic human dignity. She stood up, gathering her materials with practiced efficiency. Goldman Sachs will consider proceeding with a modified merger under these terms. You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow to decide. And if I refuse? Destiny paused at the door, her hand on the handle. When she turned back, her expression held no mercy whatsoever. Then Blake Tech dies, and you become a cautionary tale about what happens when power corrupts absolutely. The door closed behind the Goldman Sachs team with a soft click that sounded like a coffin lid falling shut. Connor sat alone at the table with his board members, the weight of his choice crushing down on him like gravity. Patricia Quinn's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Connor, you have exactly 14 hours to save this company. For the sake of 14,000 employees who did nothing wrong, I pray you make the right choice. But Connor Blake wasn't thinking about employees or choices or redemption. He was thinking about the look in Destiny Washington's eyes when she delivered her ultimatum. It was the same look she'd given him that morning when she'd said, "Have a good day, sir." The look of someone who had been planning his destruction all along. Connor Blake sat alone in his penthouse, the Seattle skyline twinkling beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows like stars in a universe that no longer made sense. Empty whiskey bottles lined the marble counter, testament to his attempt to drown the day's revelations in single malt scotch. His laptop screen glowed with search results for Destiny Washington Goldman Sachs. Page after page revealed a career trajectory that defied everything he thought he knew about the world. Harvard Business School, summa cum laude. Goldman Sachs' youngest senior partner in company history. Led acquisitions worth over $200 billion. Featured on Fortune's 40 under 40 list 3 consecutive years. Impossible, Connor muttered, scrolling through professional headshots of Destiny in power suits, shaking hands with CEOs, addressing corporate conferences. She was serving coffee, taking orders. She called me sir. But the evidence was undeniable. Destiny Washington wasn't just successful. She was legendary. A financial prodigy who'd revolutionized merger strategy. A woman whose recommendations could make or break multinational corporations. The woman he'd humiliated with orange juice controlled more wealth than some countries. Connor's phone buzzed with another call from Trevor, which he ignored. Instead, he opened a new browser window and searched deeper, looking for anything that might explain how he'd become trapped in this nightmare. What he found made his blood freeze. Seattle Times, November 3, 2024. Goldman Sachs announces major West Coast expansion. Senior partner Washington to lead Seattle operations. November. She'd been in Seattle for 6 weeks, exactly the time frame she'd mentioned for her investigation. But why Blake Tech? His company was successful, profitable, growing. Why target him specifically? Connor kept searching, following digital breadcrumbs that led deeper into Destiny's past. Harvard academic records showed a thesis on predatory corporate behavior and systematic workplace discrimination. Her early career had focused on hostile takeovers of companies with poor diversity records. She's a crusader, Connor realized aloud. A social justice warrior with a Goldman Sachs expense account. But there had to be more. People didn't orchestrate elaborate undercover operations without personal stakes. Connor's drunken mind struggled to piece together the puzzle, following instincts honed by years of corporate warfare. He found the answer buried in a 3-year-old legal document that mentioned Destiny Washington as a character witness in a discrimination lawsuit. The plaintiff's name made Connor's heart stop. Angela Washington versus Pinnacle Financial Group. Angela Washington. Same last name. Same intelligent eyes in the court filing photograph. Same quiet dignity in her expression. Connor's hands shook as he clicked through the case details. Angela Washington, a senior accountant at Pinnacle Financial, had filed suit against CEO Bradley Patterson for sexual harassment and racial discrimination. The case had been settled out of court for an undisclosed amount, but not before Angela's career was destroyed. Character witness statements painted a picture of systematic abuse. Patterson had called Angela uppity for questioning financial discrepancies. He'd touched her inappropriately during meetings. He'd told investors she was a diversity hire who didn't know her place. The same phrases Connor had used that morning. "Oh God," Connor whispered, understanding flooding through him like ice water. "She's her sister." He found Angela's obituary 6 months later. Heart attack at 34. No husband, no children. Survived only by her younger sister, Destiny Washington, senior partner at Goldman Sachs. The pieces crashed together in Connor's alcohol-soaked brain. Destiny hadn't chosen Blake Tech randomly. She'd been hunting him specifically, drawn by reports of his behavior toward employees. The cafe job, the patient intelligence gathering, the perfect setup. All of it designed to expose him the same way Bradley Patterson had been exposed. Except Patterson had survived his scandal. His company had weathered the storm. Connor's empire was crumbling in real time. "Thanks. That's exactly what I needed to hear." Connor ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "Why are you here? Come to gloat. Watch me grovel before the big meeting." Destiny settled onto his leather couch, her posture relaxed but alert. "I came because I couldn't sleep either. Guilty conscience? Something like that." She picked up one of his crumpled apology attempts, smoothing out the wrinkled paper. "You're trying to write your way out of this. Isn't that what people do? Apologize when they screw up. Depends on whether they mean it." Destiny's eyes met his across the coffee table. "Do you mean it, Connor?" The use of his first name caught him off guard. Not Mr. Blake. Not Sir. Just Connor, spoken without contempt or calculation. "I don't know," he admitted, slumping into the chair across from her. "I've been sitting here for hours, trying to figure out what I'm supposed to feel. Sorry. Angry. Humiliated. All of the above. What do you actually feel?" Connor studied her face, searching for tricks or traps. But Destiny's expression held only genuine curiosity, as if she really wanted to understand his perspective. "Confused," he said finally. "Yesterday morning I was Connor Blake, master of the universe. By lunchtime I was a viral villain. Tonight I discover the waitress I humiliated is actually more successful than I am, and she's been hunting me because I remind her of the man who killed her sister." "Destroyed her sister," Destiny corrected gently. "Angela died of heartbreak, but Bradley Patterson broke her heart." "Same result." Connor's voice carried unexpected bitterness. "Your sister is dead, my company is dying, and somehow we're both supposed to find meaning in this mess." Destiny was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the leather cushions. When she spoke, her voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. "Angela would have liked you, you know. Before yesterday. Before all of this." Connor stared at her in disbelief. "The woman I destroyed would have liked me? That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Not the woman you destroyed. The man you used to be." Destiny pulled out her phone, scrolling through old articles. "I did research beyond your pattern of abuse, Connor. I know about the scholarship fund you started for underprivileged kids interested in technology. The coding bootcamp you funded in South Seattle. The time you personally visited every family when you had to do layoffs in 2019. Connor's throat tightened. Those weren't public relations stunts. Those were private choices, personal convictions that nobody was supposed to know about. How did you find out about those things? The same way I found out about your pattern of abuse. Thorough investigation. Destiny set down her phone, her expression thoughtful. The man who started that scholarship fund understood that talent exists everywhere, but opportunity doesn't. That man would never have poured juice on a waitress. So what happened to him? Power happened. Success happened. The world told you that you were special, and you started believing it. You stopped seeing other people as people and started seeing them as supporting characters in the Connor Blake story. The words hit him like physical blows, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. Connor remembered the exact moment when deference had stopped feeling like politeness and started feeling like his due. When "sir" had transformed from courtesy to acknowledgement of his superiority. Angela used to talk about that, Destiny continued. How success could poison people. She said the most dangerous moment in anyone's career was when they stopped being grateful and started feeling entitled. She sounds wise. She was. Brilliant, funny, kind. She saw the best in everyone until Bradley Patterson taught her that not everyone deserved her faith. Connor walked to the window, staring out at the Seattle skyline. Somewhere out there, people were waking up to jobs at Blake Tech, unaware that their CEO's arrogance had jeopardized their futures. Tell me about her, he said quietly. Destiny joined him at the window, their reflections overlapping in the glass. Angela was 5 years older than me. Raised me after our parents died in a car accident when I was 16. She worked 3 jobs to put me through Harvard, never complained, never asked for thanks. That's why you became so successful. You were trying to justify her sacrifice. I was trying to protect her. Build a world where brilliant women like Angela could thrive without being destroyed by insecure men. Destiny's voice caught slightly. I failed. They stood in comfortable silence, 2 people who'd spent the last 24 hours as enemies discovering unexpected common ground. The city spread below them, beautiful and complex and indifferent to their pain. I have a sister too, Connor said suddenly. Kate. She's a teacher in Portland. Husband, 3 kids, happy life. I haven't talked to her in 2 years. Why not? Because she told me I was becoming someone she didn't recognize. Said success was turning me into a stranger. Connor's laugh held no humor. I told her she was jealous of my achievements. That she couldn't understand the pressure of running a billion-dollar company. Was she right? About everything. Kate saw what was happening to me before I did. Before yesterday morning, I would have said I was the same person who started Blake Tech in my garage. Now I can't even remember what that person believed in. Destiny touched his arm gently, the first human contact they'd shared without hostility. He believed in possibility, in using technology to solve problems and create opportunities. That man still exists, Connor. He's just buried under years of ego and entitlement. How do you know? Because you're here. At 4 a.m, trying to figure out how to save your employees' jobs. The purely selfish Connor Blake would be in the Cayman Islands by now, transferring assets and planning his exit strategy. Connor looked down at her hand on his arm, surprised by how much that simple gesture meant. When was the last time someone had touched him with genuine compassion rather than calculation? Destiny, I need you to know something. What I did yesterday, what I said, it wasn't really about you. It was about me feeling small and powerless, and I took that out on someone I thought couldn't fight back. I know. I saw your uniform and made assumptions. Racist assumptions. I dehumanized you because it made me feel better about my own failures. I know that too. Then why are you here? Why aren't you home celebrating the destruction of another Bradley Patterson? Destiny moved away from the window, settling back on the couch. When she looked at him, her eyes held a sadness that made his chest ache. Because destroying you won't bring Angela back. And because the man who funded that coding boot camp deserves a chance to find his way home. Connor felt something crack inside his chest, a wall he'd built around his heart over years of corporate warfare. I don't know if I can find that person again. Then maybe we can find him together. Together! Connor's voice was barely audible. After everything I've done, you'd help me? Angela always said that people deserved second chances if they were willing to do the work. Destiny's smile was tentative but genuine. Are you willing to do the work, Connor? He thought about his sister Kate, about the employees depending on him, about the man he'd been before success had poisoned him. The choice felt monumental and simple at the same time. Yes, he whispered. God help me, yes. Destiny nodded, pulling out her phone. Then we have 5 hours to rewrite the merger proposal. Not Goldman Sachs terms or your terms, but something that serves everyone. You'd do that? Risk your career to help the man who humiliated you? I'd risk my career to honor the woman who raised me. Angela believed in redemption. Connor. In the possibility that people could change, grow, become better versions of themselves. As dawn broke over Seattle, Connor Blake and Destiny Washington sat side by side at his dining table, rewriting the future of Blake Tech. Not as enemies or adversaries, but as two broken people trying to build something beautiful from the wreckage of their pain. For the first time in years, Connor felt hope. The most unexpected partnerships can emerge from the darkest moments. The Goldman Sachs boardroom buzzed with tension as Seattle's most powerful business leaders filed in for the merger meeting that would determine Blake Tech's fate. Connor Blake sat at the polished table, his appearance transformed from the broken man of 5 hours earlier. Clean-shaven, wearing a navy suit, he looked every inch the billionaire CEO, but his blue eyes held a humility that hadn't been there before. Destiny Washington entered with the Goldman Sachs team, her charcoal suit and professional demeanor giving no hint of the intimate conversation they'd shared at dawn. She took her seat across from Connor, their eyes meeting briefly before she opened her briefcase with practiced efficiency. Patricia Quinn called the meeting to order, her voice tight with barely controlled stress. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here to discuss the proposed Goldman Sachs acquisition of Blake Tech, contingent on the resolution of recent events surrounding our CEO's conduct. Lawrence Goldman adjusted his glasses, his expression unreadable. Before we proceed, I believe Mr. Blake has prepared a statement. Connor stood slowly, his hand steady despite the magnitude of the moment. The apology he and Destiny had crafted together felt authentic in a way his earlier attempts had not. Yesterday morning, I committed an act of racist violence against an innocent woman, he began, his voice carrying clearly across the room. I humiliated Destiny Washington because I was angry, frustrated, and looking for someone to blame for my own failures. There is no excuse for my behavior. No justification. No explanation that makes it acceptable. The room remained silent, faces around the table reflecting various degrees of skepticism and attention. I have spent my entire adult life believing that success gave me the right to treat others as less than human. Yesterday, Ms. Washington showed me what real strength looks like. She faced my cruelty with dignity, my hatred with grace, and my arrogance with a kind of character I can only hope to develop. Connor's voice grew stronger, more passionate. Blake Tech was built on the principle that technology should serve humanity, not the other way around. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that principle. I became exactly the kind of person our company was supposed to replace. He reached into his jacket, withdrawing a folded document. Effective immediately, I am resigning as CEO of Blake Tech. The board will select new leadership that reflects our original values of innovation, inclusion, and integrity. Gasps echoed around the room. Patricia Quinn's eyes widened in shock. Connor, that's not what we discussed. It's what needs to happen. Connor's gaze found Destiny's across the table. Ms. Washington and I have spent the morning developing a new merger proposal that protects Blake Tech's employees while ensuring the company's future reflects its founding principles rather than my personal failings. Lawrence Goldman leaned forward, his interest clearly piqued. What kind of proposal? Destiny stood gracefully, her movements confident and assured. Goldman Sachs will acquire Blake Tech for $87 billion as originally planned. However, the company will be restructured as a benefit corporation with a dual mission: technological innovation and social responsibility. She began distributing copies of the revised proposal, her voice professional but warm. $50 million will fund diversity and inclusion programs. Another $50 million will establish the Angela Washington Foundation for Workplace Dignity and Respect. The remaining acquisition funds will be used to expand Blake Tech's community outreach programs. Sandra Lee, reviewing the documents, looked up with surprise. This proposal actually increases Goldman Sachs' investment while reducing projected profits. Why would we agree to these terms? Because sometimes doing the right thing matters more than maximizing returns, Destiny replied simply. Connor watched faces around the table, seeing calculation replace skepticism. The proposal was generous, almost impossibly so. But it represented everything he'd hoped BlakeTech could become before ego had corrupted his vision. Lawrence Goldman set down his copy, his expression thoughtful. Ms. Washington, this proposal differs significantly from your original recommendation. Yesterday you advised complete termination of merger discussions. Yesterday I believed Mr. Blake was incapable of change. This morning's conversation proved me wrong. Suddenly, the conference room door burst open with enough force to rattle the windows. Bradley Patterson strode into the room, his silver hair perfectly styled, his expensive suit tailored to perfection. Behind him walked Rachel Foster, Connor's former head of PR, her expression a mixture of triumph and malice. Well, well, Patterson's voice carried the smooth confidence of a man accustomed to controlling rooms full of powerful people. What a touching reunion! The racist billionaire and the vengeful sister, working together to rewrite history. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Destiny's face went pale, her professional composure cracking for the first time since Connor had known her. Connor stood protectively, his body language shifting into defensive mode. Patterson, you have no business here. This is a private meeting. Actually, I have every business here. Patterson moved to the head of the table, claiming space like a predator marking territory. Pinnacle Financial has been monitoring BlakeTech's situation with great interest. When your stock price collapsed yesterday, we acquired a 37% stake in your company. Patricia Quinn's face went white. That's impossible. We would have been notified of any major stock purchases. Not when they're made through shell companies and offshore accounts, Rachel Foster said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. Mr. Patterson has been planning this acquisition for months. Yesterday's incident simply accelerated our timeline. Connor's world tilted as the implications hit him. You orchestrated this. The viral video, the media attention, the stock collapse. You were waiting for me to self-destruct. I didn't need to orchestrate anything, Patterson laughed, the sound like breaking glass. Men like us always destroy ourselves eventually. I simply positioned myself to profit from your inevitable fall. Destiny found her voice, though it shook with barely contained rage. You killed my sister, destroyed her life because she threatened your criminal enterprise. And now you want to profit from her memory. Your sister was a troublemaker who couldn't accept her place in the corporate hierarchy, Patterson replied coldly. Just like you, apparently. The Angela Washington Foundation? How deliciously ironic. I'll be shutting that down immediately once Pinnacle assumes control of BlakeTech. Connor stepped between Patterson and Destiny, his protective instincts overriding everything else. You're not taking my company. The Goldman Sachs merger prevents any hostile takeover. Does it? Patterson smiled with predatory satisfaction. Rachel, show them the real merger documents. Rachel Foster opened her briefcase and withdrew a thick folder, placing it on the table with theatrical precision. These are Goldman Sachs' actual merger terms, negotiated 3 days ago. Complete acquisition contingent on Blake's removal and Pinnacle Financial's participation as a minority partner. Lawrence Goldman's face flushed red with anger. That's impossible. We never negotiated with Pinnacle Financial. You negotiated with Lawrence Goldman, Patterson corrected. But I am Lawrence Goldman's superior at Goldman Sachs, New York. The real Lawrence Goldman. Your Seattle colleague has been operating under limited authority this entire time. The room erupted in chaos. Voices raised in anger, confusion, and disbelief. Connor stared at the man he'd thought was Lawrence Goldman, seeing a stranger for the first time. You're not Goldman? Connor whispered. Lawrence Rothschild, Goldman Sachs Seattle office director, the man replied quietly. I've been trying to protect both of you from exactly this situation. Destiny's professional mask shattered completely. You used me. Used my pain, my sister's memory, to set up some elaborate corporate raid. I used your predictable emotional responses, Patterson corrected. You've spent 3 years hunting men like Connor Blake, convinced that destroying us would honor your sister's memory. All I had to do was point you in the right direction and wait for the explosion. Connor felt everything he'd fought to build crumbling around him. Not just his company, but the fragile connection he'd forged with destiny, the hope for redemption he'd discovered in their dawn collaboration. The merger proposal we wrote, he said numbly. The foundation, the benefit corporation structure. Worthless paper, Patterson dismissed. Pinnacle Financial will strip Blake Tech's assets, sell off the valuable intellectual property, and liquidate the rest. 14,000 employees will lose their jobs, but the shareholders will profit handsomely. Destiny stared at Connor across the table, her eyes filled with betrayal and devastation. You knew. You had to know this was coming. I didn't know anything. Connor's voice broke with desperate sincerity. Destiny, you have to believe me. Everything we talked about, everything we planned, it was real. Was it? Or were you just buying time, finding another way to manipulate me? No. God, no. Destiny, please. But she was already gathering her things, her movements mechanical and defeated. I should have known. Men like you, men like Patterson, you never really change. You just find new ways to cause pain. She moved toward the door, her professional armor reassembling itself with each step. But Connor could see the cracks, the places where hope had lived for a few brief hours before being crushed under the weight of cruel reality. Destiny, wait! She paused at the door, not turning around. Goodbye, Mr. Blake. I hope your 30 pieces of silver keep you warm. The door closed behind her with finality, leaving Connor alone in a room full of enemies and strangers. Patterson's satisfied smile felt like acid on his soul. Don't look so tragic, Blake, Patterson said cheerfully. You'll walk away with enough money to buy a small country. Your employees will suffer, but you'll be fine. Connor looked around the table at faces that had once respected him, now showing only disgust and disappointment. The merger documents lay scattered like broken dreams, their carefully crafted hope reduced to worthless paper. For the first time in his life, Connor Blake understood what it meant to lose everything that mattered. And he was just getting started. Connor Blake stood alone in his office on the 38th floor of the Blake Tech building, staring at the city that no longer felt like home. 2 hours had passed since the boardroom explosion. 2 hours of watching his life's work be dismantled by lawyers and accountants who spoke in cold numbers rather than human dreams. His personal assistant had already cleaned out her desk. Security guards waited in the hallway to escort him from the building he'd built from nothing. The Ferrari in the parking garage would be repossessed by evening. Everything he'd accumulated through 15 years of relentless ambition was disappearing faster than smoke in wind. But none of that mattered compared to the look in Destiny's eyes when she'd walked out of that boardroom. Goodbye, Mr. Blake. I hope your 30 pieces of silver keep you warm. Connor's reflection stared back at him from the window, a man who'd gained the world and lost his soul in the process. The phone on his desk buzzed constantly with calls from reporters, lawyers, and former friends eager to distance themselves from his radioactive reputation. A soft knock interrupted his self-examination. Trevor Kane entered hesitantly, his young face pale with exhaustion and stress. Sir, the legal team needs you to sign the asset transfer documents. Mr. Patterson is demanding immediate compliance with the takeover terms. Connor didn't turn from the window. What happens to the employees? Pinnacle Financial plans to eliminate 85% of current positions. The coding bootcamp program will be terminated immediately. The scholarship fund will be dissolved and the money redirected to executive compensation. Every word hit Connor like a physical blow. 14,000 families would lose their income because of his arrogance. Hundreds of underprivileged kids would lose their chance at a better life because he'd chosen cruelty over compassion in a moment of weakness. There has to be something we can do, Connor said quietly. Some legal challenge, some way to protect them. Trevor's voice cracked with emotion. The lawyers say Patterson's takeover is completely legal. He owns 37% of the company, enough to force the dissolution of employee protection programs. Without the Goldman Sachs merger as a buffer, we have no leverage. Connor closed his eyes, remembering Destiny's voice from their dawn conversation. The man who funded that coding bootcamp deserves a chance to find his way home. But home was gone. Destroyed by his own hands and Patterson's calculated cruelty. Sir, there's something else. Ms. Washington is in the lobby. She's asking to see you. Connor's heart stopped. She's here. Building security wanted to turn her away, but she insisted it was urgent. Something about uncovering new information regarding the takeover. Hope flared in Connor's chest like a struck match. Maybe she'd found something, some legal loophole or corporate technicality that could save Blake Tech from Patterson's butchery. Send her up immediately. Trevor nodded and left, his footsteps echoing in the suddenly empty office. Connor straightened his tie and tried to compose himself, but his hands shook with nervous energy. Everything depended on the next few minutes. Destiny entered his office with the same professional grace she'd shown in every encounter, but something was different. Her eyes held a fire that hadn't been there in the boardroom, a determination that cut through her earlier devastation. "We need to talk," she said, closing the door behind her. "Destiny, I know you don't believe me, but I had nothing to do with Patterson's scheme. The conversation we had this morning, the merger proposal we wrote together, all of it was genuine." She studied his face for a long moment, as if weighing the sincerity of his words against the accumulated evidence of his character. "I know," she said simply. Connor blinked in surprise. "You know. I spent the last 2 hours investigating Patterson's takeover. Shell companies, offshore accounts, stock manipulation. It's all there, Connor. A pattern of corporate raiding that goes back 15 years. She opened her briefcase and withdrew a thick folder, spreading documents across his desk like a war map. Patterson has done this dozens of times. Target successful companies, wait for leadership crises, then swoop in to strip assets and eliminate competition. Blake Tech was never about revenge or justice. It was about money. Connor stared at the evidence, seeing the scope of Patterson's manipulation for the first time. He used your grief. Used Angela's memory to turn you into a weapon against me. Yes. And I let him because I was so consumed with anger that I couldn't see the bigger picture. Destiny's voice carried the weight of self-recrimination. I became exactly what he needed, a brilliant, ruthless operative willing to destroy anyone who reminded me of the man who killed my sister. So what do we do? How do we stop him? Destiny's smile was sharp as a blade. We don't stop him. We destroy him. She pulled out her laptop and opened a presentation that made Connor's eyes widen. Financial records, recorded conversations, email chains, bank transfers. A complete dossier of Patterson's criminal activities spanning decades. Patterson made one crucial mistake, Destiny explained. He assumed I was just an emotional woman seeking revenge. He never considered that I might be a world-class financial investigator with access to Goldman Sachs research resources. Connor scrolled through the evidence, seeing pattern after pattern of illegal stock manipulation, bribery, and corporate fraud. This is enough to destroy him completely. Send him to prison for the rest of his life. It is. But there's a catch. Connor looked up from the laptop, seeing something complex and painful in Destiny's expression. Using this evidence requires me to admit that I've been conducting unauthorized investigations while employed by Goldman Sachs. Corporate espionage, breach of fiduciary duty, misuse of company resources. I'll be fired immediately and face potential criminal charges myself. The magnitude of her sacrifice hit Connor like a sledgehammer. You'd give up your career? Everything you've built. Angela didn't die so I could climb corporate ladders, Destiny said quietly. She died because good people stood by and did nothing while evil men destroyed innocent lives. I won't make that mistake again. Connor felt something shift deep in his chest, a tectonic movement of the heart that changed everything. This woman, whom he'd humiliated and betrayed, was willing to sacrifice her entire future to save his employees. There has to be another way. Some option that doesn't require you to destroy your life. There is one other option, Destiny said carefully. We could walk away. Let Patterson have Blake Tech, let 14,000 people lose their jobs, and live with the knowledge that we chose our own comfort over doing what's right." The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Connor understood that this moment would define not just his future, but his fundamental character. Was he the selfish billionaire who'd poured juice on a waitress, or was he the man who'd started a coding bootcamp to help underprivileged kids? If we expose Patterson, what happens to Blake Tech? The company gets returned to its original shareholders. The employees keep their jobs. The scholarship fund and community programs continue. Destiny paused, meeting his eyes directly. "And you remain as CEO, assuming the board and shareholders can forgive your past behavior." Connor laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "After everything I've done? The viral video, the racist attack, the complete destruction of my reputation? They'd never trust me to lead a lemonade stand, much less a billion-dollar company." Maybe not. But isn't that their choice to make? Shouldn't 14,000 families have the opportunity to decide whether they want to work for a man trying to change, rather than being forced to work for a monster who never will? Connor walked to the window one last time, looking out at Seattle's skyline. Somewhere in those buildings were Blake Tech employees worried about their mortgages, their children's college funds, their dreams for the future. They'd trusted him once, before he betrayed that trust through arrogance and cruelty. If we do this, if we expose Patterson, you lose everything. Your career, your reputation, possibly your freedom. And you'll face criminal charges for the racist attack, civil lawsuits from damaged parties, and the constant scrutiny of a world that will never let you forget your worst moment. Destiny's voice was steady, resolute. Are you willing to accept those consequences if it means doing the right thing? Connor thought about Angela Washington, a woman he'd never met but whose memory had changed his life. He thought about the man he'd been before success had corrupted him, and the man he might still become if he chose courage over comfort. "Yes," he said simply. "Whatever the cost, whatever the consequences. Those people trusted me once. Maybe I can earn that trust back." Destiny nodded and began uploading files to a secure server. The evidence will be transmitted to the SEC, FBI, and major news outlets simultaneously. Patterson will be arrested within hours. Blake Tech's stock will be frozen pending investigation. Your company will survive, but both of our lives will never be the same. Connor watched her work, marveling at her grace under pressure. "Why are you doing this? Really? After everything I put you through, why risk everything to save me?" Destiny paused in her typing, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. When she looked at him, her eyes held a sadness that made his heart ache. Because Angela always said that people deserved second chances if they were willing to do the work. And because the man who's willing to sacrifice his freedom for his employees' welfare is worth saving. She hit enter, and the evidence began its digital journey toward justice. In moments, Bradley Patterson's criminal empire would begin its collapse. But the personal cost would be measured in years of legal battles, public scrutiny, and professional ruin. Connor Blake and Destiny Washington stood together in his office, two broken people who'd chosen to build something beautiful from the wreckage of their pain. Outside the window, Seattle sparkled in the winter sun, beautiful and full of possibility. Sometimes redemption requires sacrificing everything you thought you wanted for everything that actually matters. 6 months later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of Brew and Bite Cafe as Connor Blake pushed through the familiar glass door, the same chime announcing his arrival that had sounded on that fateful December morning. But everything else had changed. Beverly Patterson looked up from behind the counter, her silver hair catching the light as she smiled warmly. "The usual, Connor. Please, Bev. And thank you for letting me hold the meeting here." Connor settled into the corner booth where his life had imploded 6 months earlier, but the man sitting there bore little resemblance to the arrogant billionaire who'd once demanded perfection from the world. His blonde hair was shorter now, more practical than stylish. His blue eyes held a quiet humility that came from walking through fire and emerging transformed. The past 6 months had been the most difficult and rewarding of his life. The FBI investigation into Bradley Patterson's criminal empire had made international headlines. Patterson himself now sat in a federal prison, serving 15 years for securities fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy. His corporate rating network had been dismantled, returning billions of dollars to victims across 3 decades. But justice had come at a price for everyone involved. Connor's phone buzzed with a text from Trevor. Board meeting confirmed for 2 p.m. Final vote on your reinstatement. The Blake Tech Board had initially removed Connor as CEO following the December incident, but 6 months of community service, sensitivity training, and genuine transformation had slowly rebuilt their confidence. The viral video of his racist attack still haunted his reputation, but it had been joined by newer footage. Connor working at homeless shelters, Connor speaking at diversity conferences, Connor personally apologizing to every service worker he'd ever mistreated. The cafe door chimed again, and Destiny Washington entered wearing a simple blue dress that made her natural beauty radiant. Their eyes met across the crowded restaurant, and Connor felt his heart skip the same way it had for months now whenever she appeared. She'd lost her position at Goldman Sachs, just as she'd predicted. Corporate espionage charges had been dropped in exchange for her testimony against Patterson, but her career in high finance was over. Instead of destroying her, the loss had liberated her to pursue work that matched her values. "Sorry I'm late," Destiny said, sliding into the booth across from him. The foundation meeting ran longer than expected. The Angela Washington Foundation had grown beyond their wildest dreams, funded by recovered assets from Patterson's criminal network and donations from people inspired by their story. In 6 months, they'd implemented workplace dignity programs at over 200 companies, provided legal support for discrimination victims, and created mentorship opportunities for young professionals of color. Beverly brought them coffee without being asked, her expression fond and protective. She'd become something of a surrogate mother to both of them during the dark months following the exposure of Patterson's crimes. "How did the presentation go?" Connor asked, noting the exhaustion in Destiny's eyes. "Microsoft wants to implement our workplace respect protocols across their entire organization. It's a 3-year, $20 million contract." She smiled tiredly. Angela would have been amazed. Connor reached across the table and took her hand, marveling at how natural the gesture had become. Their relationship had developed slowly, carefully, built on shared purpose rather than passion, mutual respect rather than attraction. The love had grown gradually, nurtured by working together to build something meaningful from the ashes of their former lives. "She'd be proud of you," Connor said softly. "Proud of everything you've accomplished." "Proud of everything we've accomplished," Destiny corrected. The foundation wouldn't exist without Blake Tech's financial support and technological infrastructure. The early days had been brutal for both of them. Death threats from white supremacists who saw Connor as a race traitor. Harassment from social justice activists who viewed Destiny as selling out to her oppressor. Legal battles that drained their savings and tested their resolve. But they'd faced it together, 2 broken people learning to trust again, to hope again, to love again. Connor's phone rang, displaying Patricia Quinn's name. He answered with the speaker on so Destiny could hear. "Connor, it's unanimous. The board has voted to reinstate you as CEO of Blake Tech, effective immediately." Destiny squeezed his hand as relief flooded through him. "Thank you, Patricia. I won't let them down again. See that you don't." The shareholders are watching closely, and public opinion is still mixed. But the employees support you, the community programs are thriving, and our stock price has recovered to pre-scandal levels. You've earned this second chance. After hanging up, Connor and Destiny sat in comfortable silence, processing the magnitude of the moment. 6 months ago, he'd been a disgraced pariah facing criminal charges. Today, he was reclaiming leadership of the company he'd built from nothing. "So what happens now?" Destiny asked. "Now we keep building. The coding bootcamp expands to 5 cities this fall. The scholarship fund has tripled in size. And Blake Tech becomes the kind of company I should have created 15 years ago." Destiny smiled, but Connor caught a flicker of something uncertain in her expression. "What is it?" "Microsoft offered me a position. Vice President of Corporate Ethics, based in their Seattle office. It's a chance to impact millions of employees, not just the companies we work with through the foundation." Connor's stomach dropped, though he tried to keep his expression neutral. "That's incredible. You'd be perfect for that role. It would mean stepping back from the foundation, from working so closely with Blake Tech." She paused, meeting his eyes directly. From working so closely with you. The unspoken question hung between them like morning mist. Their relationship existed in the intersection of their shared mission. What happened when their professional paths diverged? Connor took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. Destiny, 6 months ago you sacrificed your entire career to save my company and my employees. You've spent every day since then helping me become a better man and building something beautiful from the wreckage of our pain. Connor, let me finish. You've given me everything. Your trust, your forgiveness, your love. The least I can do is support your dreams, even if they take you away from me. Tears gathered in Destiny's eyes, and Connor realized his own vision was blurring. I haven't said yes to Microsoft yet, she whispered. Why not? Because somewhere between that terrible morning in December and this moment right now, I fell in love with a man I never expected to exist. Not the billionaire CEO or the public figure seeking redemption, but Connor Blake. The guy who works homeless shelter kitchens on weekends. Who remembers the names of every Blake Tech employee's children. Who still can't believe that someone like me could love someone like him. Connor's throat constricted with emotion. Destiny Washington, you are the most extraordinary woman I've ever known. Brilliant, compassionate, strong enough to forgive the unforgivable and brave enough to build hope from heartbreak. He slid out of the booth and knelt beside the table, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. The cafe fell silent around them, other customers recognizing the magnitude of the moment. I know our story started with hatred and pain. I know I have no right to ask for forever after causing you so much hurt. But if you'll have me, I want to spend the rest of my life proving that love is stronger than prejudice, that redemption is possible, and that two broken people can build something beautiful together. Destiny's tears fell freely now as she stared at the ring, a simple diamond that caught the morning light like captured starlight. You're asking me to marry you in the same cafe where you poured orange juice on my head 6 months ago? I'm asking you to marry me in the place where my old life ended and our new life began. Where a woman with infinite grace showed a broken man what real strength looks like. Destiny laughed through her tears, the sound like music in the morning air. Yes, Connor Blake. Yes to forever, yes to Microsoft, yes to building something beautiful together even when our paths take different directions. Connor slipped the ring onto her finger as the cafe erupted in applause. Beverly wiped tears from her eyes behind the counter. Other customers raised their coffee cups in impromptu toasts. Even Danny Rivers, now the cafe's assistant manager, cheered from the kitchen. As Connor and Destiny embraced, their lips meeting in a kiss that tasted of coffee and forgiveness and infinite possibility, the morning sun painted everything golden. Outside, Seattle hummed with life and opportunity. Blake Tech's headquarters gleamed in the distance, ready for new leadership that valued people over profits. The Angela Washington Foundation's offices buzzed with activity, changing workplace culture one company at a time. And in a small cafe on Pine Street, two people who'd found love in the aftermath of hatred proved that redemption was always possible for those brave enough to choose it. Connor Blake had learned that true power came not from dominating others, but from lifting them up. Destiny Washington had discovered that love could bloom even in ground poisoned by prejudice and pain. Together, they'd built something neither could have created alone, a future worth believing in. Have a good day, sir, Destiny had said on that terrible December morning, not knowing that her grace would plant seeds of transformation that would grow into forests of hope. 6 months later, as morning turned to afternoon in a cafe filled with love and second chances, every day was good indeed. Love conquers hate. Redemption defeats revenge. And sometimes the most beautiful stories grow from the darkest moments. 1 year later, the Seattle Convention Center buzzed with energy as Connor Blake stepped up to the podium, facing an audience of 3,000 business leaders gathered for the annual Corporate Responsibility Summit. Exactly 1 year had passed since the morning that changed everything, and the date was not lost on anyone in the room. A year ago today, Connor began, his voice steady and clear, I committed an act of racist violence that was captured on video and seen by millions. I stand before you not as someone seeking sympathy, but as someone who learned that true leadership means accepting full responsibility for our failures and working every day to earn back the trust we've broken. In the front row, Destiny Blake smiled proudly, her new wedding ring catching the stage lights. They'd married 3 months earlier in a small ceremony at Brew and Bite Cafe, with Beverly Patterson officiating and Angela's photograph watching over them. The audience included faces that told the complete story of their transformation. Trevor Kane, now Blake-Techa's chief operating officer, had stood by Connor through the darkest months, helping rebuild the company culture from within. His loyalty had been rewarded with the promotion and respect he'd always deserved. Kate Morrison, Connor's sister, sat in the third row with her husband and children. She'd flown up from Portland the moment the news broke a year ago, not to condemn but to support. "I told you that you were becoming someone I didn't recognize," she'd said during those first difficult days. "Now I get to watch you become someone I'm proud to call my brother again." The legal consequences had been real and substantial. Connor had pled guilty to assault charges, served 60 days in county jail, and completed 500 hours of community service. The civil lawsuit filed by multiple advocacy groups had been settled for $15 million, with the money funding anti-racism education programs across Washington state. The media attention had been relentless but gradually shifted as Connor's actions spoke louder than his words. The viral video of the juice-pouring incident now appeared alongside footage of him working in soup kitchens, speaking at high schools about the dangers of prejudice, and personally delivering scholarship checks to underprivileged students. Public opinion had been slow to change, but change it did. A recent poll showed that 63% of Americans believed Connor's transformation was genuine, while 37% remained skeptical. Connor had learned to accept both responses with equal grace. "The hardest part," Connor continued his speech, "wasn't facing the legal consequences or the public humiliation. It was looking at myself in the mirror and accepting that I had become exactly the kind of person I'd once despised." Rachel Foster was notably absent from the audience, having fled to New York after her role in Patterson's scheme was exposed. She'd avoided criminal charges but found herself unemployable in the public relations field. Her betrayal had taught Connor the difference between loyalty and sycophancy. The Blake-Tech employees had been divided initially. Some called for Connor's permanent removal, while others argued for giving him a chance to prove his change was real. The turning point came during a company-wide meeting where Connor answered every question honestly, took full responsibility for his actions, and outlined concrete steps for cultural transformation. "I don't expect forgiveness," he'd told his employees that day. "I expect to earn it through actions, not words." The employee retention rate during the crisis had been remarkably high. 92% chose to stay and be part of the rebuilding process. The scholarship fund had expanded to support over 1,000 students annually. The coding bootcamp now operated in 12 cities, with plans for international expansion. "The Angela Washington Foundation," Connor said from the podium, "represents something my wife taught me, that our worst moments don't define us unless we let them. Angela Washington died because powerful men refused to see her humanity. The foundation exists to ensure that never happens again." Destiny had seamlessly balanced her Microsoft role with foundation oversight, creating innovative workplace dignity programs that had been adopted by Fortune 500 companies worldwide. Microsoft's workplace harassment incidents had dropped by 87% in the year since she joined their leadership team. The foundation had processed over 12,000 workplace discrimination complaints, achieving resolution in 91% of cases. More importantly, it had created a cultural shift where dignity and respect were becoming standard business practices rather than charitable afterthoughts. "My wife often says that redemption isn't a destination, it's a daily choice," Connor continued. "Every morning, I wake up and choose to be better than the man I was yesterday. Some days I succeed. Some days I fall short. But I never stop trying." In the audience, Beverly Patterson wiped tears from her eyes. The cafe had become an unexpected pilgrimage site for people seeking second chances, with visitors from around the world coming to see where love had triumphed over hatred. Danny Rivers had used his scholarship from the Angela Washington Foundation to complete business school and now managed 3 Brew and Bite locations across Seattle. His success represented everything the foundation hoped to achieve: opportunity creating transformation. The convention center erupted in sustained applause as Connor concluded his remarks. Standing ovations had become routine at his speaking engagements, but they still humbled him. A year ago, these same business leaders had been calling for his complete destruction. As he left the stage, Connor was surrounded by executives wanting to implement Blake Teka's diversity programs, journalists seeking interviews, and young professionals thanking him for proving that people could change. But the person who mattered most was waiting just off stage. Destiny, radiant in a red dress that matched her triumphant smile. "How do you think Angela would feel about today?" Connor asked, taking his wife's hand. Destiny looked out at the crowd of powerful people who'd been moved to examine their own behavior and create positive change in their organizations. "I think she'd say we turned her tragedy into triumph," Destiny replied. "And that's the most beautiful ending any story could have." As they walked out into the Seattle evening, past protesters who still occasionally gathered to denounce Connor and supporters who celebrated his transformation, they carried with them the knowledge that love had indeed conquered hatred. The viral video would never disappear from the internet. The racist attack would forever be part of Connor Blake's legacy. But it would not be the end of his story. Because some endings are actually beginnings, and some disasters are actually doorways to grace. And in a small cafe on Pine Street, where orange juice had once symbolized cruelty, the morning coffee now tasted like hope. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, wait until you see what's coming next. It's even more powerful and inspiring than you can imagine. So don't go anywhere. Click on that video showing on your screen right now to dive into another amazing story that will absolutely blow your mind. Trust me, you won't regret it.